back, and we are in part 2 of section 2, and we're moving on to what components are. Now, if you've actually heard anything about React, you've probably heard of components, and you saw it in our last section. I just briefly pointed at it, but we're going to actually move into what components are. And again, just like I said with JSX, don't worry too much about all the theory behind what these are. If you want, you can go read about like what JavaScript, the programming language, is and all that, and what it means to have all different types of classes and stuff. And that is important on some level for your programming. But for this basic overview of React, and also just using React in a very practical way, you can get away with understanding functionally what these do. And that's really what I'm aiming to teach you. So we're going to focus on functionality here. So when it comes to components, it's just a word that we use to describe like a little chunk of React code that we package up, and that has to do specifically with displaying it, rendering things for the users rather than passing data around, because we're going to have other chunks of code that just pass data and manage it. But this is more specifically for rendering. So it's going to have JSX in it, and that's why we're moving on from it immediately after that. It's a JavaScript class, like I said, don't worry about it too much. Two of the key things is that it is reusable. That is very helpful. If you make a component that just has, let's say, a p tag with JSX like we did last time that just displays a variable, you can reuse that anytime you wanted to make a little bit of text. Now, you probably wouldn't do that because it's just totally overkill, but that's the sense of what you can do with components. You make one and you can implement them in multiple places, which is very useful. They're also typically interactive, as will become evident through some of the ways that we'll attach interactive events and click handlers and variables changing and that kind of stuff as a result of it being the display front end to the user. So components represent basically a more divided up approach to web pages, as I put here. Basically, we're splitting it up into pieces, and you really have to think in a modular style, and that's part of what we're going to be exploring in this whole thing. It'll come fairly easy once you get beyond the code and into the kind of philosophy almost behind what we're doing. Well, since we've actually talked a bit and actually looked a little bit at our component already, we're going to just go look at a little bit at the React docs and just get a general idea what's going on here. We are going to use all these methods, but it's kind of good to get your head around the general nature of what's going on. So I've just searched up the React.js docs, just searching component React, and it's one of the first results. So like it says here, components let you split the user interface into independent reusable pieces. And you think about each piece in isolation. That's crucial, like I was saying with modularity. And we've shown this. Now, there's some important things we're going to talk about in more depth later. One is life cycle. So this is a bunch of events that are going to happen when a component basically renders. So we can hook into these events and do a few different things. There's a whole bunch of them here, and we will go over most of these in detail. We're going to just do a very simple one at first, just so we have something to see of how this is important. And then there's various things that we're going to also look at more, setting state, and there's properties, and there's all these types of ways that you manage data and rendering through components. So they are the core of what we're going to be doing in React. So let's just go a little bit and hook up just a basic event here. So we have component did mount. And this will, as I said, there are these functions that we can put, just like the render function, right into the component, and they are already made within this. They're already part of what a component is, and that's what a class is. A class allows you to create these kind of events that are going to run these methods. And so we're just going to hook right in, and we're not even going to do anything too complicated. We're just going to console log out, mount it. And that is just going to run as soon as this opens up, and nothing else should change. So let's just see. Once I save it, this should refresh, and there it says mounted. You even get it before we even get a little warning very early on. It's as soon as it mounts. And that's very useful for setting defaults and that kind of thing. But the more important thing to take away is that we can add these methods, and we're going to be able to define our own later on and all kinds of things. If you have messed around in more detail with JavaScript, this will be very familiar to you. So let's go on to the next section where we're going to start talking in a bit more depth about how components can fit together, and also a few more of how we were going to pass events and define these other events using JSX and React.